As we mentioned, the Arizona Attorney General announced yesterday that a state grand jury has indicted 11 Republican fake electors along with 7 supporters of Donald Trump, all for conspiring to overturn Trump's loss in the 2020 presidential election. And to help break down the indictments, we welcome former U.S. Assistant Attorney Roy Herrera, founding partner of Herrera Arellano LLP. It's good to have you here. We got a lot to talk about today. Yeah, let's get started here. Why these indictments now? Why not sooner?
Well, you know, I think most of us in the legal and political community knew that the indictments were going to come at some point, and there was some concern, perhaps criticism, that the Attorney General was taking longer than some of the Attorney Generals in other states. But I think there's a perfectly good explanation for that. One being is that Kris Mayes, the Attorney General, was just elected in this last election cycle, so she was a little bit behind in comparison to some of the other Attorney Generals who had been incumbents before. And we now know that former Attorney General Mark Brnovich seemingly did not investigate this at all. So she was basically starting from scratch, and I think that explains why it took a little bit longer.
Okay, and we got conspiracy, we got fraud, we got forgery. Why these charges? Why against these folks?
Well, it's an interesting indictment. It tracks most closely to the Georgia indictment, and what I mean by that is we've had a number of states that have now indicted these fake electors in their respective states. But like in Georgia, the indictment includes as defendants not just the 11 fake electors, but additional co-defendants. And again, as you mentioned, the names of these people are redacted, presumably because they haven't been notified yet of the charges, at least formally. We have some sense, given in the language of the indictment, some clues, if you will, on who these additional co-defendants are. But what it suggests is a much broader conspiracy, including folks, perhaps even legal counsel from the Trump campaign, who might have been indicted here along with these fake electors.
And again, according to the Attorney General, they deprived Arizona voters of their right to vote, deprived Arizona voters of having their votes counted because, I mean, they just basically said, no, you're not the ones, we're the ones. I mean, what were they thinking? I don't understand this.
That's exactly right. So, you know, being a presidential elector is an official position. The certification that you send to Congress, to the Electoral College, everything that happened that January 6th is all official. You know, it's an official role. And what they decided to do is essentially impersonate the actual electors, the duly elected electors from the state, and impersonate and forge the official document that they were, in fact, the electors that should have their votes counted in the Electoral College. So that's why we get forgery and fraud claims, because they've essentially purported to be these people that they are not and have authority in ways that they do not.
And again, we think we know who the 7 others are. There are also unindicted co-conspirators, and Donald Trump obviously is number one. I think you can kind of deduct who is whom. I think Kenneth Chesebro, who gave a lot of information to a lot of folks in different states regarding this whole plan. Why were they not indicted?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, we don't know yet. Again, we have some sense from this indictment about what the general theory of the case is and what kind of evidence they may have, but we don't know the full story. We don't know the full story of all the evidence that was presented to the grand jury here, the full story of what the AG is going to present in trial here. So for some, it could be that they just decided strategically not to indict. For others, it could be that perhaps they just didn't have strong enough evidence to indict.
And what does unindicted co-conspirator mean?
Well, it definitely means that this person played a role in this conspiracy that we're talking about here. I mean, the obvious one is Donald Trump. There's been a deduction that there could be some other unindicted co-conspirators that could be former, let's say, Republican elected officials. That's another sort of guess, and I think it's a good one. So it could be people that were involved in this, but again, the AG or the grand jury may have just decided that they didn't want to go forward. It also could mean that maybe some of these unindicted co-conspirators are actually cooperating, which is another big question here.
And I was going to ask you that next. I mean, first of all, what is their defense? And secondly, I mean, this looks ripe for plea agreements up, down, and sideways, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I definitely think one of the strategies on the prosecution end is going to try to get some of these defendants or perhaps these unindicted co-conspirators to flip, to essentially start testifying against defendants. And we've seen that in other states. We've seen in Georgia, for example, a number of the indicted individuals actually plead guilty and provide testimony against other people in the conspiracy. I imagine that they're probably going to try to do that here. As far as what the defense looks like, I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting. It seemingly is going to be something to the effect that these actions, becoming these electors, sending this certification to Congress, was done on a contingency basis. So basically, the idea being, well, we thought that Congress was going to overturn the result of the election and instead select us, and so we weren't doing anything necessarily illegal. We were just essentially in place in case Congress decided to act.
But there's no evidence of that. I mean, other state electors, fake electors, they did put that in writing some way, somehow. Is there any evidence in Arizona?
Not that we have seen. Now, again, every defendant's going to get their day in court as they are entitled to under our criminal justice system. So we don't know, but we haven't seen anything like that reported. So I think that's going to be a hard argument to make in front of a jury, because ultimately this is all going to go in front of a jury of our peers here in Arizona, and they're going to be the ones that decide.
What about a defense of ignorance? I didn't know what I was signing, or I had bad legal advice from either one of the other people indicted or my attorney, or these sorts. I thought that there was some sort of contingent. Does that ring? And again, I'm hearing a lot of Chris Mays is weaponizing the Attorney General's office. Yeah, that's not much of a defense, is it?
I don't think so. Now, on that last piece, criticisms of the Attorney General,
yes,
weaponizing the criminal justice system that way, that could be something perhaps that you try to garner some sympathy from the jury about, right? I mean, you maybe bring that up to them, because we do have a thing called jury nullification, where if a jury is just sympathetic, ignores the evidence, maybe you get a hung jury in that way. But I think it's going to be very difficult, because to your point, I think it's going to be hard, particularly when we know that there was a meeting or a series of meetings of these individuals who decided to take on this role. They signed a document. That document was sent off to Washington, D.C. I think it's going to be pretty hard for them to explain and put the blame on someone else, telling them that what they did was okay.
Real quickly, what's next in all this?
Well, I think right now what's probably going to happen is all of these defendants are looking for criminal defense lawyers, obviously. I think there's going to probably be some negotiation about these folks' initial appearances, because they do eventually need to make an appearance in court, have the charges read against them, plead not guilty, presumably. So all of that is probably going to get worked out sometime here soon, and we'll see some of these defendants actually going into court. I think we'll also see some of these redacted names of co-defendants released, and so we'll get a sense of who those people are as well.
All right, can you stick around?
Absolutely.
All right, good. We'll take a break here. We're going to ask Roy Herrera to stay with us as we look at the U.S. Supreme Court hearing arguments today on Donald Trump's claim of absolute immunity for actions while in office.